Hey, Kate from Venison for dinner here. Our crew has made multiple trips to the Kitimat River in northern BC over the last few weeks. And this bounty means that we're doing things like canning and smoking. And today I'm going to show you how we can smoked fish.
Yeah. Come on, buddy. That's the right direction. There we go. That's a freaking gorgeous. That one's yours, Juniper.
Nice fish, Marco. That's a big one. Oh, yeah.
Look at our fish.
Beauty. Yeah, finally we're getting a fish.
Finally getting used to it.
I'll link for you a full video on how Marius fillets salmon, but this is a chum salmon for reference. He's cutting out the belly ribs and that belly portion for us to feed to our dogs. If we didn't have dogs to feed it to, we would be canning that as well. But if you've seen the price of dog food recently, you understand why we're trying to supplement our dogs wherever possible. And we have a bounty of fish. So the dogs are getting either raw fished or we cook it until it falls apart, add in some rice and vegetables and, make it like a gruel in cold weather. Anyhow, on to the canning fish. Marius always uses a towel. He finds it less slippery and easier to handle on the counters this way. After you've filleted your salmon, you're gonna use the jar you're canning into, the size you're doing, to cut your chunks accordingly. And this makes it so much easier to stuff your jars after you smoke the fish. It's morning and this fish doesn't need to brine until tonight, so we're just putting it in containers and then it will go in the cooler and stay cold until we're ready to get it brining tonight. And I'll make sure to show you that. So he's got a lot to still work on here. Is there fish in there?
Yeah.
Can you show me a chum?
Yeah.
Or have you dealt with a chum?
I dealt with one already, but I can pull another one.
That was the big guy.
So these are pink salmon?
Yep.
We also have a
How do you tell that it's a pink salmon?
Oh, wow.
Oh, spots on the tail.
Size?
Starting to grow a little hump. We don't have a... Let me pull a male out.
Okay,
Just
so
know that.
pinks are also called humpies then?
Yeah.
Male.
But if you can't mistake.
Okay, so
Male?
once they start to spawn, a male pink
Yeah, these
grows
are
a
all
hump.
so fresh. We only
They're just
saw-
at the beginning of
none
their
them
spawning
have humps.
cycle.
Yeah.
Just
Matt, can you pull me up a chum salmon and
They got
explain it to
little
me?
spots on them. They're a small fish.
Yeah.
Spots on the tail.
Okay, just hold it over top of there. So how do you tell that it's a chum?
Look at the coloring.
Okay, so that
and
coloring?
purple.
Yeah. Green and purple.
That's pretty crazy, that coloring.
When they
this
hit the
is
fresh.
color.
Amos, don't touch
But
it.
then,
Did you have a spring salmon?
yes.
Can you show me the spring?
Did I find it in this?
Hold on.
How about this one?
The spring was in the middle. Yep, that's the spring.
That's our spring
So
salmon.
then how do you identify a spring salmon? The spots on the back? Okay, cool.
But then there's this chum who's just perfectly silver.
That's a fresh chum.
Okay, so if they haven't started spawning at all, or you caught it in the ocean,
Still got the
okay, it still has some coloring on it there.
Starting to color up, but these fish were
Whoa.
from where we were fishing within a couple kilometers of the ocean. So
Yeah.
they were just starting to run up the river.
Yeah.
And then there's
They are.
this.
Couldn't be any fresher.
Yeah, this is bigger fish.
And there's Marius' mom at the table, saving me from my laundry.
Then there's this head.
Look at that. Oh,
This guy
yeah.
was already dead.
So once they're really spawning, that's when
That's a male.
a male. When do they start to get that nose and?
Oh, out in the ocean.
Okay.
The teeth.
But when they're
They
coming,
pull up by the mouth of the river for a while before they run the river, and that's probably when that happens.
okay.
Yeah, but this guy's.
There's no way he grew those teeth in the half an hour it took him to swim the river. But he
Okay.
could have been in the river for a couple days. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Okay, so it's about 8 p.m. at night and it's time for us to get this going. Marius has it all weighed out. There's 50 pounds, so we're doing molasses, a fat half cup. So I told him to just add another glurp in beyond that. So we've got our water. We'll be adding more water here. We start with just some warm water to get everything dissolved well. We have salt. I'm going to give you all these amounts in the video description. Sugar, molasses, all into the warm stuff. And then we'll add cold water in to cool the whole thing down because you don't want to put the fish into a warm brine. That would affect the quality of your fish. So then it's simple. We're just layering fish into containers. He already had it in containers. Oh, he's just moving it so that these one containers aren't so full. So because you're adding liquid, you don't want to have too full of containers. And then we just take our brine and we cover them all with the brine. Because the fish is so densely in there, he gives a little shake, as well as he'll put his hand in there to get any air pockets out to make sure that that brine is well throughout all the pieces. In the morning, a couple hours before you actually want to get it in the smoker, we give it a rinse off to rinse off all the extra salt and sugar so that it doesn't end up too salty on us. So it's just getting rinsed in cold water until your hands feel numb, and then keep going with your numb hands. Technically, you should be putting these all on like cookie drying racks, but we do not have that many cookie drying racks, so we just use towels. And make sure you wash your towels right away afterwards, because if you forget them for a couple days, you will think something died in your laundry room. We have done this more than once. The fan is blasting away here. Let's see. So you can see what you're looking for is a tacky surface. So it's not quite there, but this stuff is just getting canned. It's not as particular about that. Whereas this stuff here is getting smoked. Like this is getting smoked and then canned. This is just getting smoked. I actually have to run the dog to the vet, and so I'm not gonna be home when Marius is getting this in the smoker, but I asked Mac if he could film for me so that he could show you. But basically we get that pellicle going, and then we just want equivalent to like 1 pan of smoke before we can them. You want that smoke flavor without it being dried out, because you don't want to can dry fish. That would just be like no bueno. So it'll just be a bit. So by the time I get back, it should be ready for me to get canning, at least by the time I have all my jars washed and whatever. So Marius' fishing buddy that went with them, his wife is coming. She wants to learn to can fish, so she's gonna learn to can fish, friends. There's a lot of fish to can. And it's funny because he had said to Marius, you can keep all my salmon. We have too much salmon. And I had already talked to his wife because they buy canned tuna, but then they give away salmon. So she was like, what are we doing? They tried canned salmon here and they wanted to make it themselves. So we're gonna do that. Amos, can you leave the airlocks? Thank you. Once the pellicle has formed and he's ready to smoke it, he moves it on to cookie sheets. And this is why having a lot of cookie sheets is very handy. We have 6 big cookie sheets because we use them for all sorts of things beyond just cookies. He uses the truck, not the tractor, to move them down for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's less trips down there because it's kind of a roundabout way. Number 2, then he has a work table when he gets down there. So he fills all the trays in the smoker and pops them in before he gets the smoker going. He used to get the smoker going and then he would put in the meat, whether he's doing fish or pork is usually what we're smoking. But you get very smoked out and it really hurts your eyes trying to fill the smoker when it's so smoky. So then he gets a little fire going. We save apple wood when people are cutting down trees. If we know they are, Marius will go and cut up all their apple wood into little bits. And then he has a bucket full of wood soaked. So he starts it with a dry fire and then he adds wet wood so that you get lots of nice smoke in there. I heard him say he could also use alder. It's gonna be really regional what woods you can get. So we only give this about an hour of smoke or a pan of smoke if you're using an electric smoker. Before it is smoked enough, you want it to have smoke flavor but not be dried out. I feel like I keep repeating that, but it's important. So then the trays come out of the smoker and it gets moved back to the cookie sheets so that they can get brought inside. And there's still candied salmon that's gonna go for a bit longer in there. I got back home just in time. My friend and I started washing up jars. These were just dusty. They were not really dirty. So just giving them a little rinse before we start filling them. And this is where it's been so handy that we cut it to the right size. So you take your fish, it doesn't have to be skin side out, but it usually is. And they're just the perfect size because you see that ring on the neck. You don't want to overfill them. And remember that when you take this fish out of the jar, it's going to get like mushed into salmon sandwiches or salmon patties. Don't worry about just shoving it in there because it's coming out mushy anyways. We ended up with 3 to 4 canner loads worth of fish. We did some half pints, but mostly pint jars. Then we use white vinegar to wipe the rims clean. This gets any grease, salmon fat that might be on there that's gonna get in the way of our jars sealing. And then we put the lids on, and friends, I have to tell you, I'm a rebel canner and I reuse lids. You don't have to do this, you can use new lids, but don't come at me if you don't like reusing lids. That's, I do my way, you do your way, but I will explain to you reusing lids in just a second. So after you've put the lids on, you put on rings, just fingertip tightness. So put them on as much as they easily go, and then just give them a fingertip little tweak tightness. So see how as far as it easily goes, just a little bit more. Okay, so here's some lids. See that dent? Don't reuse a lid that has a dent like that. It won't seal. Don't reuse a lid that's stained or smelly. That one actually looks nice and good. Sorry, it was blurry there. But there's common sense here, friends. And if you're not comfortable with it, use new lids. So I've got 3 quarts of water, and I'm just using warm water, not hot water, because my jars are only room temperature. So then I put the water on low, and we start filling up. So you can stack pint jars. Someone told me you're supposed to have a rack in between, but my pressure canner didn't tell me that I needed to have a rack in between, so I don't have a rack in between. If you're using smallmouth and wide mouth jars, always put the wide mouth on the bottom because smallmouth doesn't stack on smallmouth well. You really need to do wide mouth on the bottom, smallmouth on top. If you're doing half pints, you can do multiple of them. And then we always check our lid before we put anything in it. Do the seals and everything, they look good. You can see through that hole. The locks, they move well. And I guess I didn't tell you that literally we just put fish in the jars. There's no added water. You're only putting raw fish in the jars. Because we're starting with jars that aren't hot, I always start on low for 10 minutes before I turn up the heat. And then once you can see steam, which is really hard to show you. See this, there's not enough steam there yet. You want lots of steam. You're following your pressure canner manual, but once it starts steaming, I set a timer for 10 minutes and it vents for 10 minutes, and then I pop that thing on top. So my stove is actually too hot, and once it comes up to pressure, which for my elevation is 12 pounds of pressure, again, friends, check your manual, whatever. So we're a little high here, but it's fine, it'll come down. I have to move it to the back to a smaller element to maintain that temperature. I was out getting the dog from the vet, but I called Mac when my timer went off, and he turned these off. He had been babysitting them for me. So once the lock goes down, oh, there's a dog hair. I got dog hair everywhere on me. That dog did not want to get in the vehicle. Once that's down, you wait 10 minutes, and then you can take this off. So I've actually got 2 going here. If you've never done this before, please wear oven mitts. No, okay, wait guys, please. Hey,
Don't
out of the stuff, please.
close the gate so he doesn't run into it.
So open it away from you so the steam goes away from you. I open it away from me, and then I rest it so it can vent a bit. So I'll leave them for a couple minutes, then I'll take the lids off and we'll take all the jars out, and then the jars need to stay in one place for 24 hours without, not near an open window or anything. So think about where you're putting them because they need to stay there for 24 hours. Well, it happens. No use in crying over it. I have 4 pint jars. How am I moving in the right direction? 4 pint jars left, friend, which is definitely not a pressure canner load, and a pressure canner doesn't work well if it's not full. It has a hard time maintaining pressure. So at minimum, you need to fill some quart jars with water to fill out the rest of the canner, or I do beans. Oh, isn't that such a nice noise? Dried beans, because dried beans can for the same amount of time. So all I'm gonna do, I have to look up my amount, but basically you just do like a cup of dried beans. Hey girls, can you not fight over the vegetables? A cup of dried beans into your quart jar, fill it up with water, put on the lid, whatever can, it is normal. So yes, they're unsoaked dried beans, but it's a great way to make use of already running the canner, and you know, you get a little extra things involved. Oh, the dog is walking around with a cone of shame on, and he's stuck in a doorway right now. He got neutered. So many lovely poppings. I wanted to show you how amazing this fish looks out of the canner. The chum is so fatty. There's not normally this much liquid in a jar. I cannot believe how much fat is in this jar. Normally it would be like halfway down. So crazy. All my jars sealed. The jars that didn't break. So I can 2 canners. Well over a year, 18 months, I've been using 2 canners. I always start one, then the other. I often start with cold things, and then I start with cold water, and I start them on low for 10 minutes, and then I turn them up. Both times, I had jars break in the exact same place, and let me explain it to you. I was just canning cherries as well. Both times, I start this canner, and then maybe 15 minutes later, this canner. And the jars that broke were right here on the top stack. So I feel like that can't be a coincidence. And this is what my beans look like. So I was just getting these rinsed and getting those out, and I was starting to label, and I'm like the worst person at labeling things. I have messy writing, but you know what, friends? We know what this is. We know what it is. It's fine. So whenever I take jars out of the canner, after they've sat for at least 12 hours, I always tap, and you can hear the sound of a jar that's sealed. That's just thing of lard, but right? A jar that's... These just came out, so you do not touch them, because if you touch them, you can create a false seal where it will sound like it's sealed, but it's not. So then the next step, maybe this one hand here, is after I've labeled, I take the rings off, and then I lift up the jar by the seal. Because if it's not strong enough to handle this, it's not gonna store well, and you wanna just put that in the fridge and use it right away. So I'll even like give it a little bit with my fingers. I wanna make sure it's really nice and sealed. If the jars feel greasy or sticky or whatever, then we'll give them a wipe. These jars feel pretty good. This one actually needs a wipe because I had a jar break on top, but still sealed. Just working on labeling and getting these put away. I should have done it before I took the cherries out, but you know what, friends? That's life. I would rather fill jars and process them all day long than have to put away canning. Putting away canning is the putting away laundry of canning, if you know what I mean.